June 7th, 2001. We're interviewing Mr. Harry Taylor Jr. at Latham headquarters. Interviewer is Michael Akey. The videographer is Wayne Clark. Mr. Taylor, you were born where, sir?
I was born in Albany,
Okay.
Albany Hospital.
And you grew up in Albany?
When I was 2 years old, we moved to the town of New Scotland. And I grew up in the town of New Scotland.
Went to school where?
I went to school at Albany Academy in Albany.
What was Albany Academy like back then?
Well, it was a very good school. Military was foremost in the academy at that time. Good education, which a lot of us did not appreciate at that time, but turned out later that it was very valuable education.
Now you said your father was in the military.
My father was in the military. He was commandant of Troop B, 121st Cavalry here in Albany.
National Guard.
Yeah, yeah.
How long was he with the Guard?
Well, he went in the Spanish-American War, and I could not give you all of his service record offhand. His service wasn't continuous from the Spanish-American, but he was an officer in World War I overseas, and he was in the National Guard then, of course.
Now, did you ever go into the Guard?
No, I never did, because he had retired before I was old enough to go in the Guard at all. And the thought never crossed my mind anyway at that time. There was no thought of being having a military career at all.
Now, after you graduated from Albany Academy, what did you do?
Well, I didn't go right to college. I worked, I guess it was at Montgomery Ward's for a while. And then from there I went into the service.
You went to the service when? 42.
42.
September 42.
September 42.
Okay. Now, where were you in Pearl Harbor?
I was in Albany. I don't remember much about Pearl Harbor. My own experience of Pearl Harbor. Of course, I remember all the circumstances and Roosevelt and his famous speech and so on, but I don't really remember where I was at the minute of. Well, yes, I do. I know I was home. It was a Sunday, of course, and I was home when we heard it over the radio.
Now, you decided to enlist in September of 42?
Yeah, well, I had registered for the draft, and the draft was breathing down my neck. I was not too happy with working at Ward's, and I had applied for a job at the Arsenal, and that didn't come through. A friend of mine had worked there, and so I went over too, and I just decided, let's go. So I went down to the recruiting office in Albany and signed up.
What was the next step?
Well, then we went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for basic training.
What was Fort Dix like?
It was a mass of people doing things they were not happy with. Of course, I had military training, so it was no problem for me, but...
Well, that was going to be my next question. Did your training at Albany Academy serve you well?
Well, it served me well in the fact that I knew what I was doing. I never got promotion because of it, especially, but that's just the way it happened to be. And I guess a good share of my classmates the same situation.
Now, you were in basic for about how long?
I don't know. What was it, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, something like that.
And after basic?
Went to Fort Riley, Kansas. My father, of course, being in the cavalry, he made a contact and got me out to Fort Riley, Kansas.
Did you want to go into the cavalry?
It didn't make any difference to me at that time.
What was it like out in Fort Riley?
It was interesting out there. Fort Riley, Kansas was an old training post, of course. And most of the cadre were old Army. We had excellent training. Was there in the winter, and it was cold out there. The wind comes across the Kansas there, and it's bad. And a lot of us went to town and bought fur caps because we had those little wool caps, which were very warm. Otherwise, our uniforms were good. We had the regular heavy overcoat and so on.
Now, were they still training with horses?
We were training with horses. All our training was with horses. And it was the same training that had always been given. There were 4 men in a squad, and you fight on foot. One man holds the horses, and the other 3 go and fight on foot. You don't fight from a horse. We went on hikes and so on. And
what did you think of the cavalry at that point? Now, we're into the early part of World War II. And, did it make sense? Or it didn't
no, it still made sense. We had heard about cavalry units here and there being used, and it still made sense. We were better off than the infantry. So, when the training was finished, and we got shipped to 1st Cavalry Division in Fort Bliss, Texas. And at that time, they had become mechanized, or in the process of becoming mechanized.
What did the old timers think about that?
I don't really remember what they thought, but we were slated to go overseas within a few months, so. Of course, the cadre down there was old-time cadre too, and many of them had many years of service. We had a master sergeant with stripes from his cuff to his shoulder.
Now, so you joined the 1st Cav. What was your job? What was your training for?
I got into supply in the 1st Cavalry Division. We were a division headquarters troop, so we were not a combat unit. 1st Cavalry Division was a square division. In other words, they had 4 regiments. And the famous 7th Cavalry Regiment was one of them. But I was in the headquarters unit, and that's where I served for all my time in the cavalry. I was not in the, I was the headquarters troop, so we were the supply and support unit for division headquarters, okay? So we had a relatively safe existence, although we were subject to shelling and bombing from time to time.
Now, when did you first hear you were going to go overseas? Did you know where you were going to go?
No, I don't, if I remember, I guess, when I got to Fort Bliss, at Fort Bliss, Texas, I guess there were plans to go overseas. I don't remember whether they had planned to go. We knew we were going to California to go overseas, so I guess it was assumed we were going to the Pacific. So.
Now, where was your first overseas stop?
We went to Australia, Brisbane, Australia. Of course, at that time there was a threat of invasion of Australia, and so we were stationed in Australia for a while, Brisbane.
What was Brisbane like back then?
Brisbane was a growing town, a growing city. You might liken it to any small city. There was a theater, which we used to go into, and but most of our time was spent on the post, of course.
How well were you received by the Australians?
We were well received. Although we did not We didn't have occasion to mix especially with them, but we were well received. They appreciated us. And we had fun with the Australians because we couldn't understand them and they couldn't understand us. And
It's English, but it's different.
yeah, right, right.
And after Brisbane, how long were you in Brisbane?
Oh, just a few months.
And then where?
Then we went to the New Guinea.
What's
Yeah.
life like in New Guinea?
Life was, New Guinea's a tropical island, of course, and we began to experience tropical conditions and so on. We didn't do much in New Guinea. We were stationed there. The fighting was pretty well over in New Guinea when we got there. We did tour a couple of the cemeteries, national cemeteries in New Guinea, but we didn't have too much, our division didn't have much action there. Then from there we went to the Admiralty Islands.
What was it like there?
Well, that was where our division was in combat. Interesting thing, when we landed, I think it was in the Admiralty Islands, the division regiments were supposed to be there and clean out the place, and we got in there and they started shooting at us. The Japs were shooting at us, and there wasn't supposed to be any Japs there yet anymore, but they soon took care of that. And well, we didn't do any. We were combat ready all the time, of course, but and we spent several months there, and then we headed for the Philippines.
What, living in the tropics, difficult living?
It was difficult. It was hot. It rained every day for a few minutes. We got so that we were never dry. Our feet were in terrible shape because we did not have waterproof boots. We had jungle boots, but they were not waterproof. So we were constantly fighting, trying to get our feet cured, our feet healed up. And it was hot, sticky.
So the supply situation for clothing was not particularly good?
Oh, no, we had all the clothing we wanted, except it wasn't appropriate clothing. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, we didn't have shirts like short-sleeve shirts and so on. Naturally, the Army always gives you long-sleeve shirts and all that stuff. And they hadn't learned about, I don't know, whatever they give you now, but
Disease a problem?
malaria, of course. But we were free of malaria mostly because we took Adabrin, which was a vile-tasting pill, especially when they put it in your mess kit. They used to put it in the mess kit every morning, and then they put the eggs on top of the Adabrin, and if you weren't careful, you chewed on the Adabrin, and that was the worst-tasting thing you ever had. The food was pretty good. I don't remember where, but from time to time we'd got fresh eggs, and which was a change from dehydrated eggs. But being division headquarters, I think we probably got a little better than some of the other units because we did have the officers there. And
What kind of recreation was it?
well, we had the Red Dog Saloon, 3.2 beer, mostly card playing, a lot of card playing. We did have 2 or 3 fellows who were guitar players and singers, and we enjoyed them. Then, of course, we did have the USO come in. We had Joey Brown. We had, I think Bob Hope came in. But there were other troops came in, the USO troops came in with lesser people.
That was a pretty big deal when the USO showed up?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And being in division headquarters, why we sort of got first shot at them, and we took care of them and housed them. Yeah, we got to meet several of them. In fact, I have a picture home with Joey Brown in a little pub. I guess that was in Australia, I think. And half a dozen of us with Joey Brown sitting on the bar talking to us. Yeah.
What were the officers like in the division?
They were good officers. Our general was, of course, we had the general with us. First one was Ines Palmer Swift. And when we went to go overseas, they painted his name on the trunk, General I.P. Swift. And that was changed immediately. But he was, he'd been in a long time and headed towards retirement, then he retired. And we had another general, General Vernon Mudge, who went and got himself a grenade in his stomach because he used to go out in combat and he got a grenade. He lived, but that was the end of his service. I forget other generals.
What do you think of MacArthur?
Well, we didn't think much of MacArthur.
Why is that?
I don't know. He just kind of left us, and he was a big figurehead, sort of. And I remember when we were in Philippines, MacArthur came to visit when he returned, and we were all set for MacArthur, and all of a sudden came the call, he's here, and he came in his big sedan and drove through, and that was the last we saw of him. But he sent us out there to do the dirty work, and
So, yeah, your view of MacArthur is particularly a good.
well, we sort of tempered it after the war, but
Where did you go next after
we were in the Philippines in Leyte, then we went to Luzon, and we liberated Manila. The old city of Manila, I forget the name of it now, but we liberated that, where they had a lot of Americans as prisoners.
What was that like?
Well, there was a good-sized city, and we experienced I should say, a primitive city by today's standards. But it was a big city, and there was a lot of activity. We were free to go into Manila and experience native. We also were in a little village outside of Manila, and we got to know the native.
How did they view you?
Oh, we were their liberators. Yeah, we were. They loved us. These were the Filipino natives lived in little bamboo huts on stilts. And I got friendly with one family, and they used to feed me once in a while. They loved to make fried chicken and with lots of garlic. And you could smell a village because the garlic was, they used a tremendous amount of garlic and always smell a village. But we got along very friendly with the natives.
Do you have any contact with Japanese POWs?
Japanese? No. Not especially. That I can remember anyway.
Any contact with the American POWs after liberating?
One fellow in our outfit had, his aunt was interned in Manila, and he met her, and if I remember, we all got to meet her. She was quite elderly, of course, but we got to meet her, and but that was the only contact we had. They were handled by other units.
where were you when VE Day broke out? Was announced. European victory.
We were in the Philippines.
Okay.
I vaguely remember the announcement. We knew it was coming. And I remember that came over on the radio that they had signed it, that the war was over in Europe. Other than that, I don't remember much.
Now, as the war was winding down in the Philippines, in the Pacific, were you thinking at all about having to invade mainland Japan?
Yes, we were. We were getting ready to invade mainland Japan, and everybody was going to be a combat soldier. Even though we were a non-combatant unit, we were going to be combat soldiers. Everybody was getting ready to go to Japan, and we were quite concerned about that.
The general feelings were difficult? Or?
It was going to be very difficult. We had heard that they were dug in underground and so on, and that would be very difficult for everybody concerned. It was going to be a massive undertaking, I guess. But then they dropped that bomb, and
so what's your view on that, Truman's decision to drop the bomb?
well, I don't think anybody's in favor of an atomic bomb, but to us it meant the end of the war was coming. And we would be, actually it saved the lives of thousands and thousands of American soldiers and Marines and so on.
Generally viewed as a positive thing for those people who were
Positive thing, yeah, right, absolutely, right. And of course, when we heard that the war was over, that they had surrendered, that was great. But we were set to go to Japan anyway, so we just went as occupying.
What was that like?
Well, that was interesting. Of course, on September the 2nd, we sat next to the Missouri in Tokyo Bay, and we could see them signing the surrender
Really?
on the deck of the Missouri. Yeah,
Must be quite an experience.
yeah, our ship was right, maybe a couple of 100 yards from the.
Do you remember what ship you were on?
No, it was a.
Transport? Troop transport?
Yeah, it was I don't know, it was a Liberty ship, something or other.
Now, when you landed for occupation duty, what exactly did that mean?
It meant we just went and set up camp.
Did you have much contact with Japanese civilians?
We did not. Our unit did not, because we were beginning to prepare to send people home. So everybody was assigned to work on personnel records. So we didn't get much freedom to go to town. We didn't know where to go in the first place. And we just didn't have a great deal of contact with the civilians. And there were fellows that were there longer than I, and they were slated to come home, and we got their papers already. Then they said, well, you're next. So we went to work on our own papers, and pretty soon we shipped out.
You shipped out in 45 or
In
46?
40, I'm sorry, 44.
You were discharged in 45.
We shipped out in 44. We were put on a troop transport, or AKA, APA, which was a Navy transport, shipped to San Francisco.
45, wasn't it?
And then we were flown home on a C-47.
Oh, what was that like?
Bucket seats along the side. But first time I'd ever flown. We each had a can and a sort of a sling seat we were sitting on, lined up along the sides. Well, we came into New York City, and then we were shipped to Fort Dix to be discharged.
And after you discharged?
Well, I went to the Bronx Hospital because I had pleurisy, and so they put me in the hospital for several months. And just kept me there for observation, more or less, because I was feeling good and pretty well cured. Finally was discharged and went home.
What did you do when you came home?
I went to our business college. Yeah.
And who'd you meet at the business college?
I met my wife there.
And after you graduated from business college?
I went to work for a scrap dealer as a bookkeeper, and then I went to work for the state of New York. And I was there with the state of New York for 4 years, and I went to work for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company for 10 years. And then I went back to the state of New York, and I retired from the state of New York 18 years ago. We both retired on the same day. Yeah.
What is your general feeling of your military experience?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much. It was an experience that I'm glad I had, and it's something that I really think everybody should experience. But whether there's a war or not, I think it's a good thing.
Any final thoughts?
No?
Very good.
Just glad we're here.
Well, I'm glad you're here too. Thank you very much. It was a very good interview.
Thank you.
So for somebody that didn't think they had anything to say, I tell you, you did pretty good.